All right, so in this lesson, we're going to write an equation in a different form. So if you have a standard equation, you'll be able to make it into vertex or factored form. If you have a vertex form, we can make standard and factored form. So we're going to just make all the different forms depending on which type of equation we start with. So in this problem set, we're working from standard. And let's again review what are the parts of a standard form. Well, it's ax squared plus bx plus c. Now, the only part of this formula that's important is this a, and I think you'll see why here in just a minute. For vertex form, you have y equals a x minus h squared plus k. And that a is the same a that's in that one. And in factored form, you have y equals a x minus x1, x minus x2, and that a is the same a. So I already can write my vertex form. I can start my outline like this, where the x and the squared are the only things that you're absolutely sure are going to stay the same in every one of them. And put my a in there. My a in this problem is a equals -1, so I can go ahead and put that -1 in. Same thing over here. That a is the same, -1. Well, I don't know if it's going to be minus or plus, so I'm going to leave that part out. So there's my format for my factored form. So if I can get the vertex and the zeros of the function off of my graph from Desmos, then I will be able to make these two equations. So I'm going to switch over to Desmos and type this formula in. -x squared plus 8x minus 15. And here I have it. So let me minimize that a little bit so I can look at it a little better. So where is my vertex? My vertex is at 4, 1. Wait a minute. Let me take a picture of this and bring it over because it's so hard to write on the smartboard when I have Desmos up. I can't write on the smartboard. All right, so I'll bring that over here. So first of all, my vertex is at 4, 1. And my vertex form, let's talk about how do you put it in. So this h, where it says x minus h, you just make the x value look the opposite of what it does right now. So it looks like x minus 4. That way it looks like I put +4 right here in this formula where the x minus was. And for the k, you just put it on the end. +1 would be putting that value in for k right here. Now, if you were putting in a -4 and you had x minus -4, that would turn to a positive. So as you can see, whatever you put in the parentheses, it always looks the opposite of what it really is in the point. And that's true with the factored form as well. All right, so let's fill in the factored numbers here. The zeros of the function are 3, 0 and 5, 0, your x-intercepts. So when you write your equation for factor form, you have to make these numbers 5 and 3 look the opposite. So it'll be x minus 3 and x minus 5. Because it already has a subtraction sign in the formula, so when you fill in the 3 and 5, it's just x minus 3, x minus 5. It's that simple. And then you have your factored form. So moving from standard to vertex and zero format is very simple. Let's try another one. All right, so in this problem, we have, again, we're looking at ax squared plus bx plus c format. So a in this problem is +1. Our vertex form, y equals a x minus h quantity squared plus k, means that I already know I'm going to have y equals 1x with a quantity squared. At least that much of it I know because a is 1, and that a is the same. And when I do factored form, x minus x1 and x minus x2, then I know for sure that I'm looking at a 1 in front of that. And I can put the, whoop, something went wrong there. It stopped writing. I can put the x in each parentheses and I'm good to go. So I'm going to look at Desmos with this one. First, let me type the formula. The formula for this one was x squared minus 2x minus 8. All right, so here's my problem. There are my x-intercepts, and there is my vertex. So if I want to list my vertex here, it is 1, negative 9. When you fill in the vertex, anything that comes in and out of a grouping symbol has to change signs, and parentheses are a grouping symbol, so it'll look like -1. But when you're putting it on the outside, you don't change any signs. You keep it the same as it already is. Now let's move this over so we can look at the other side. And of course, I just wrote on top of that, so let me try that again. Let me take a picture. All right, so when we want to do zeros of the function, we have -2, 0, and 4, 0. I have two sets of grouping symbols, so I have to change both of them. It's like saying x minus that -2. What happens to that -2 is it turns to +2. And x minus 4 looks like it changed to -4. So instead of going through that process of filling it in, just make them the opposite. It's that simple. The opposite of -2 is +2. The opposite of +4 looks like subtract 4. So we just make it look the opposite. All right, so now on your worksheet, you're going to stop the video and you're going to work problem 3 and 4 on your own. I'm not going to set up a timer because you're working this at home. When you have finished problem 3 and 4, you can restart this video. Okay, so now we're going to look at what if I give you vertex form first and you are asked to work it out and to factored form and standard form. So standard form doesn't give you quite as much information as factored form does from the graph, but we're still going to graph it because it can give us some information. So again, this is a x minus h quantity squared plus k. Knowing where the vertex is not going to help me write the factored or the standard, but the a is, because this is y equals a x minus x1 x minus x2. So I already know a is 2 in this problem, so I can go ahead and make my outline. For standard form, that's going to be totally different thought process. So let me go ahead and go to the graph and pick out what we need to do the first part. So this is supposed to be 2 parentheses x minus 4 parentheses squared minus 8. I hit the wrong button. Try that again. 2 parentheses x minus 4 parentheses squared minus 8. All right, so here's our parabola. So we need the zeros of the function. That's all we need. Doesn't hurt to look at the vertex to make sure it matches what the problem says it's going to be, but I really need those two intercepts. I keep forgetting. It's not moving the whole thing. All right, 6 and 2. I'll just have to remember. 2, 0, 6, 0. So if you fill in your x-intercepts in factored form, you basically are just going -2, -6. Now, To get standard form, I know what part of it would be because I could work out part of it because I know what A is, and I could look up the y-intercept and I know C, but I cannot get B from a graph. I've got to do some algebra to get that. Now you have a choice. You can work out vertex form to standard, or you can work out factored form to standard. And I don't care which one you use, but I'm going to tell you it is a lot easier to do factored form to standard than it is the vertex form, because squaring the parentheses is a little bit more than just squaring. So I'm going to use factored form. So to do the factored form, y equals 2, x minus 2, x minus 6. First, you need to do what we call FOIL and put the parentheses together. First, outer, inner, last. Multiply those items together and see what you get. To do that, the 2 on the outside has nothing to do with that. Again, I'm going to take that away and do it one piece at a time now. So y equals 2. First times first is x squared. Outer, that's going to be negative 6x because x times negative 6. Inner, negative 2x times negative 2x is negative 2x. Excuse me, negative 2x times x is negative 2x. And then the last item times the last item is going to be negative 2 times negative 6, which is positive 12. You can combine like terms. X squared minus 8x plus 12. And last but not least, distribute. So it's a 3-step process. You FOIL it first, you add the like terms, and then you distribute 2 times every term in the problem. 2 times x is 2x, excuse me, 2 times x squared is 2x squared. 2 times 8 will make negative 16. 2 times 12 will make positive 24. And that is your final answer for your standard form equation. Now, if you want to know if you have done this correctly, there are 2 things you can do to check it. Number 1, the 2 in front of the x squared matches the original problem A value. You could go back and you could look at the graph and pull it down and see if 24 is the y-intercept, which it is. But that still won't tell you if you've got it right. So the next thing you could do to see if you've got it right is type it in the way it is in that format while you still have the other format in there. And that's minus 16x plus 24. And what you will notice is they're on top of each other, so you know you got it right because you have both equations in there and it has graphed on top of each other. All right, so it's a little bit more complicated to get standard. So let's look at the next question. So again, we're looking at factored form. This A value, A is equal to negative 1, is going to go in front of the parentheses. You're going to make your 2 parentheses for the factored form. You're going to go put that in the calculator to get your intercepts. So now I'm going to take out both of these equations and put in the new equation. Negative parentheses x plus 1 parentheses squared plus 36. All right, so I got to find my axis here. Here's my axis. There are my x-intercepts. So I'm going to have, well, they went away. Negative 7 and 5. Negative 7, 0, 5, 0 are my zeros of the function. Make them the opposite because factored form, you took it out of parentheses to to get those if you were doing this by hand. So if you want to put them back into an equation, you got to make them the opposite. So x plus 7, x minus 5 makes those numbers look the opposite. To get our standard form, we need to look at foiling this and then multiplying it by -1. So I'm going to write it down here so I can show my work, because I expect you to show work. So first, x times x is going to be x squared. Outer, x times -5 is -5x. Inner, 7 times x is 7x. And last, 7 times -5 is -35. Then you can add your like terms. These two x terms can be added together to get 2x. And one of the things you have to keep in mind when you add it, variables, powers do not change. So if you add x squared to x squared, there's still x squared. If you add x to x, it's still x's because it's linear and linear. And last but not least, multiply -1 times each one. And all that does is change everybody to the opposite. And then you can write your answer up there in the whole, if you printed these worksheets, or just show your work and I'll look for your answer. So now it's time to stop the video and work 2 problems on your own. Okay, continuing on, we have to take a factored form problem and get the vertex form and the standard form from this problem. Again, the standard form we'll do the same way we did before. We'll take this format, the factored form, and multiply it out. So let's talk about how do you get your vertex form first. So y equals ax minus h quantity squared plus k. We already know our a. It's sitting right here. It's y equals -2/5. We're going to have our parentheses squared, and all we're going to do is find that vertex and fill it in. So that's a very short process. So let's see. What do we get for that vertex? If I put in -2 divided by 5, well, it didn't take that formula, so let me try that again. -2 divided by 5, parentheses, x minus 6, parentheses, x plus 4, parentheses. Yeah, I got the formula right. So now I can minimize that so we can see it. Okay, I'm looking for the vertex. There is the vertex. It's behind my picture, so let me move that. The vertex is 110. And that's the only thing I need off that picture. But what might be helpful sometimes is to look for other things that we might want to do, like putting our formulas in and see if it graphs over top of this. 110. So when things go into the parentheses for x minus h, you'll make it look the opposite and make it x minus 1. If it goes outside the parentheses, it stays the same sign, and so plus 10. And that's all it takes to do vertex form, is have that point to plug in and that a value. Now let's talk about standard. We're going to take this formula up here, y equals -2/5 x minus 6, x plus 4, and we're going to turn that into standard. Again, to do that, you've got to FOIL it. So first times first is going to be x squared. Outer, x times 4 is 4x. Inner, -6 and x is -6x. Last, -6 and +4 is -24. We have to put parentheses around that because we're going to multiply each of those by -2/5. Think of these as fractions. Put a 1 under each one, and that'll help you to think through the process of multiplying this, because you multiply numerator to the numerator and denominator to denominator. So -2 fifths times 1 is going to be still 1. X squared, times that's just going to put the negative 2/5 in front of it. Negative 2/5 times 4 over 1 is going to be negative 8 over 5 because you multiply 2 times 4 and 5 times 1, and that's going to be how much x. I tell you what, I'm going to back up on that. I want to add those like terms together first. Why? Because it'll just make less multiplying fractions. So let me add those like terms together and get myself to that point where I've got the, delete that. I want to get that to where I only have 3 terms to do times the fraction. So 1 times negative 2/5 is still negative 2/5 x squared. If you're going to multiply this, stick a 1 under it. So 2 times negative 2 is positive 4 over 5x. And then if you put a 1 under this one and go negative times negative is a positive, 2 times 24 is 48 over 5. And there you have your y equal to formula. And again, if you printed these, you can put that up there in that blank. So here's our last question. What is A in this question? Do you see an A in the problem? I don't either. But I know that that A must be a 1 because there's nothing written here. So I've written out my format for vertex form. I'm going to go put this in the calculator and see what my vertex ends up being. So parentheses x plus 3 parentheses x plus 7 parentheses. Yeah, that's both plus. I want to make sure I'm typing it right. All right, so here we are. We're looking for the vertex, and it's right there. That number is -5, -4. -5, -4. So when you put it in the parentheses, you make it the opposite and turn it to +5. And when you put the y on the end, it stays the same. So you do the opposite of the x because it's going into the grouping symbol, and you do the same sign for the y on the end. That's not a y-intercept, it's the vertex point. Then let's take the problem up top. Since the 1 doesn't have anything to do with it, we're just going to FOIL it out and be done. X times x is x squared. X times the outer 7 is 7x. The inner x times 3 is 3x. 3 times 7 for last is 21. So my answer is x squared plus 10x plus 21, because you're going to add these two like terms together because they're both x terms. Again, when you add x to x, it's how many x's do I have. It's not how many x squares I have. It's 7x plus 3x is x's. So 3 plus 7 is 10. Very simple multiplying process. These were a lot easier than they could have been. If they'd put a number in front of x, it would have took us a little bit more time to multiply these out. And luckily, this one doesn't have an a value in front to multiply through, so that saves you a step. So now you can do problems 11 and 12, and that will get you to the end of this assignment, and then you can upload it for me.